The wind tore across the plains with a low, mournful whistle, rattling loose boards of the barn and shaking dust from the rafters. Sheriff Daniel Crowley stood still in the dim glow of a lantern that swayed on a hook, his boots planted firm on the straw-strewn floor, his eyes locked on the figure bound before him. The woman was tied to the post with rawhide rope, her wrists rubbed raw and bleeding, her dress torn at the seams as if she'd been dragged through the dirt. Her hair hung in tangled strands across her face, but her eyes, dark, desperate, and burning with an unyielding fear, met his without flinching. When she spoke, her voice cut through the restless silence like a blade. "Please, just make it quick." The words made his hand freeze where it hovered near his revolver. He had heard pleas before, men begging for mercy before the gallows, outlaws stammering prayers before their final breath, but never had he heard such quiet resolve. It was not a shriek or a wail, but a plea from someone who had already surrendered to the inevitable. His throat tightened as he looked at her, wondering what hell she had endured to make death seem like deliverance. He forced his voice to steady. "Who did this?" Her gaze shifted toward the barn doors, her jaw clenched as though the very mention of their names might summon them. "The Steel Gang. They'll be back. They said anyone who tries to free me would end up worse than me. You don't have much time. Please, Sheriff, end it before they return." The name sat heavy in the air. Daniel knew the Steels too well, rustlers, killers, men who set fire to homesteads for amusement and left families torn apart in the ashes. He had tracked them across counties, always one step behind, always finding blood and ruin where they had passed. And now they had left her behind, a cruel trap, a test of will. His jaw tightened as the horses outside shifted nervously, hooves thudding against the ground in uneasy rhythm. The night was too still, too heavy. The gang was near. "You're asking me to put a bullet in you." His voice was flat, but beneath it, something trembled. She swallowed, her eyes wet now though her chin did not lower. "Better your bullet than theirs. I know what they'll do if they take me alive again." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle on him like a stone. He had seen the work of the Steele brothers before, charred ruins, shallow graves, broken bodies left for coyotes. His stomach knotted as he imagined what she must have endured, what she was still expecting. Her wrists bled against the coarse rope, but she did not fight. She only waited. The lantern flickered as if the storm outside had found its way inside the barn. Distant thunder rolled low, but Daniel heard something else layered within it, the faint, steady thud of hoofbeats carrying across the plains. They were coming, and soon. His heart pounded against his ribs, his mind caught between two choices, both unbearable. End her suffering, grant the mercy she begged for, or defy her wishes and risk both their lives against the Steel Gang. His fingers brushed the handle of his revolver, slick with sweat despite the cool night air. He closed his eyes for a moment, and in that darkness, he saw the faces of his past. His father, who taught him that a gun was for protection, never for cruelty. His mother, whispering in the dim light of their cabin that a man's worth was not in how quick he could draw, but in how long he could stand against what tried to break him. He breathed deep, then opened his eyes, and they settled on her again. Her voice cracked, though she tried to hold firm. "Do it, please." "I can't." Her breath shuddered. "I can't go through it again." Something inside him hardened, and yet softened all at once. He shook his head slowly, his words a whisper drowned beneath the storm. "I can't do that." Her eyes widened, first with fury, then with something else, confusion, disbelief, the faintest spark of hope she had not wanted to feel. "Then you'll doom us both." The hoofbeats grew louder now, closer, the cruel laughter of men drifting faintly through the storm. Daniel's pulse surged, but instead of raising his gun toward her as she had begged, he reached for the knife in his boot. The blade caught the lantern light as he stepped forward. She stiffened, bracing for the blow. Instead, with one swift stroke, he sliced through the ropes binding her wrists. The cords snapped, and her arms fell free. She gasped, rubbing her bloodied skin, staring at him as though she couldn't believe what he had done. "You want quick," Daniel said, his voice hard as steel though his eyes burned with fire. "Then run quick, live quick, but you ain't dying here tonight. Not while I'm still standing." The barn doors rattled under the force of a boot from outside, and the voices of the Steele brothers rose in drunken mockery. Daniel grabbed her arm, guiding her toward the back hatch where the shadows offered escape. Lightning split the night sky, casting the sheriff's face in stark relief, and for a moment she saw in him not just a lawman, but a man defying fate itself. And as the door trembled on its hinges, Daniel Crowley made his choice. If death was to come, it would not be hers. It would be theirs. Rain lashed against the barn roof as the doors gave way with a splintering crash. 4 men stormed in, their boots heavy on the soaked earth, their eyes gleaming in the lamplight. The Steele brothers carried with them the stench of whiskey, smoke, and blood, their faces twisted with the cruelty of men who had never known fear. Jeb Steele, the eldest, led them, his long coat dripping with rainwater, his revolver already raised as his yellow grin spread across his face. Well, he drawled, voice as sharp as broken glass. Sheriff Crowley, didn't think we'd see you this far from town. And look at that, you've found our little gift. Behind the hay bales near the back hatch, the woman crouched low, her wrists raw but free, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She could hear her pulse hammering in her ears, louder even than the storm. Daniel Crowley stood firm in the center of the barn, revolver in hand, his stance wide and steady though his shoulder ached from where he'd slammed into the stall earlier. His face was carved from stone, calm but watchful. You boys have run long enough, Daniel said, his voice cutting through the noise. Time to answer for what you've done. The youngest Steele, a boy barely grown, barked a laugh and waved his pistol lazily. Answer, ain't no judge, no jury out here. Just us and you, Sheriff. You'll be nothing but bones in the dirt before sunrise. The woman pressed her palm against her lips, willing herself silent, knowing one wrong sound could draw their attention. She had begged for death before, but now she clung to the fragile thread the sheriff had offered. Something inside her, long buried, wanted to believe him. Jeb's eyes narrowed, and he leveled his revolver squarely at Daniel's chest. We'll give you a choice, Sheriff. Walk away now, leave the girl, and maybe we let you keep breathing. Daniel's lip curled. His voice came low, steady as a church bell. Funny thing, Jeb, you think the law don't reach this far. But the dirt remembers blood. And I reckon this ground's thirsty tonight. For a moment, silence stretched. The brothers shifted, their faces twitching with impatience. Then the barn erupted with thunder, not from the storm, but from gunfire. Daniel fired first, his bullet striking true. The youngest Steele spun backward, a scream dying in his throat as he hit the ground with a dull thud. The middle brothers roared, one charging with a knife gleaming in his hand, the other leveling a sawed-off shotgun. Daniel dove sideways, rolling behind a stall as the shotgun blasted, tearing splinters from the wood. Horses reared and screamed, their panic filling the barn as the woman ducked lower, her nails digging into her palms. Daniel rose from cover, revolver flashing. One bullet caught the knife-wielding brother in the gut. He staggered forward, mouth open in shock, before collapsing to his knees. The shotgun roared again, buckshot grazing Daniel's shoulder, searing pain across his flesh. He gritted his teeth, his breath ragged, but he pressed forward, determined. He barreled into the man with the shotgun, the two of them crashing into a hay pile, fists and boots flying. The revolver clattered from Daniel's hand, lost in the straw. The outlaw roared, swinging the stock of the shotgun into Daniel's jaw. Stars burst behind his eyes, but instinct drove him on. He grappled for the barrel, twisting it aside as another blast tore into the rafters. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She saw Jeb at the far end of the barn, revolver raised, his eyes fixed on Daniel's back. Her hands shook violently, but her gaze fell on the knife dropped earlier by the dying outlaw. She grabbed it, the handle slick with blood, and staggered to her feet. Sheriff, she cried, her voice breaking through the chaos. Daniel turned, just in time to see Jeb's revolver flash. But before the bullet found him, the woman lunged. She drove the knife into Jeb's arm, the blade cutting deep. He howled in rage, his shot going wide, burying itself harmlessly into the barn wall. Daniel seized the moment. He ripped his revolver free from the hay, raised it with iron precision, and fired. The blast echoed like final judgment. Jeb Steele staggered, his face frozen in disbelief, then toppled backward into the dirt, eyes open but unseeing. The barn went silent, save for the storm outside and the ragged, uneven breaths of the living. Daniel stood swaying, blood trickling from his shoulder and lip, his revolver still raised as if daring another shadow to move. The woman dropped the knife, her fingers trembling violently as it clattered to the floor. She stumbled forward, and he caught her before she could fall, his arm steadying her despite his wounds. "You did good," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. Tears blurred her vision, streaking her dirt-stained face. "You could have left me, you should have left me. They would have spared you." Daniel shook his head, his eyes dark but resolute. "They never spare anyone, and He glanced at her wrists, at the blood and rope burns. "You asked me to make it quick. Well, I made it quick, just for them." Her breath hitched, and then, to her own surprise, a small, broken laugh escaped her lips. She pressed her forehead against his chest, trembling from exhaustion and relief. Outside, the storm began to ease, the thunder rolling farther across the plains. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, soft and pale against the wreckage of the night. She lifted her head, her voice a whisper so faint he almost missed it. "Thank you, for not making it quick." And Daniel, bleeding and battered, held her tighter as the weight of the night lifted, knowing he had chosen life, even in a place where death ruled.